The Apaches say that at one time they were a great war tribe, but that a great army invaded their country with such terrible war implements that their people were killed before their arrows could reach the enemy. When it came to hand fight, the enemy used broad-bladed hatchets with deadly effect, and when the Apaches would lunge at the invaders who wore shields, their lances would break. And so it seemed to the Apaches that the lives of their opponents were charmed. Even though the Apaches numbered 20-1, the enemy was successful in every engagement and kept driving them north. Behind this vast army came a great number of people in charge of priests. They settled along all the watercourses, building forts and churches. In the mountains they also built furnaces and melted the rocks like water. Finally, the Apaches had to succumb to the tyranny of the invaders, and they were no better than slaves, for warriors, squaws, and children worked for them. I asked old Escanolea if this great army came from that portion of the coast where Guaymas is situated, but he said no, that they landed a great many miles farther west, but came through that country now known as Yaqui country. There were sufficient Indians to guard the entire country and also to closely surround the great city. They put a check on all farming and drove the enemy's stock away. The city held out for about a year after the uprising, until nearly all starved to death. The remaining few were easily captured, and so, from then on to the time of Escanolea's story, the Apaches were sole occupants of the vanquished enemy's ground. I told Escanolea I did not think such an account was to be found in history, and he asked me what history was and how old my country was. He laughed. Then he asked, "How does your history say about your people taking this country from us?" "I'm going to tell you what my father told me that his father had told him." "All right," said I. "There are old churches yet today in New Mexico and Old Mexico, which are over 300 years old, so there must be something left to designate such a city as you describe. I would like to go see it." He consented to take me. Welcome back to In Search of Tontonteac. Today we are looking at an excerpt from a book called Arizona in the 30s, Apache Pass. A few days afterwards we started for Montezuma City. Our course led us in the direction which I have described before, and our journey lasted about 10 days. Here the book has a footnote saying, "near Camp Verde," in the northern part of the state. In making our trip to the ruins, we camped at the foot of a large mountain, near a magnificent spring which ran into a little valley, where there was an old acequia, a primitive form of irrigation ditch, which had been used to carry the water out over the valley from the spring. Escanolea told me that the mountain ahead of us was the last we could have to climb. Just over the top lay Montezuma City. Early the next morning we started out on our climb, which proved to be very hard for the first 3 hours. Through a thick growth of pines we climbed until we came upon an old trail which ascended more gradually than the course we had just finished. We arrived at the top of the mountain at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The view from the summit, just as old Escanolea had said, overlooked the valley with a stream running through it, and there, just a short distance into the valley, lay Montezuma City. Thrilled by adventure, I was eager to reach this spot. After we had ridden about a mile, we began to pass a great number of mounds of various sizes, which lasted until we reached the stream, where we camped. Large herd of elk and deer could be seen on either side, and wild turkey were everywhere. The stream was filled with mountain trout. Here we spent 2 days, riding over the valley examining mounds which extended for miles on both sides of the stream. The courses of the acequias were quite discernible. Escanolea took me to a very large mound where he said the commander had lived, and as we went around the old crumbled walls, we found old pottery and copper implements, and some articles which resembled helmets and breastplates. While I was examining these things, old Escanolea watched me very intently and said, "Ton, u, ga," or "What is the name of it?" I explained to him why their arrows and lances had no effect upon the invaders of their country. I told him that it was a metal covering which even the balls of a rifle could not penetrate, much less arrows. Inside these ruins were signs everywhere of a once populous city. If these ancient ruins were not the ones described to me by Escanalea, then what could they have been? It was certainly one of the loveliest valleys I had ever seen, and nature had provided food for a lifetime within easy reach. I asked old Escanalea why his tribe did not live here. With great surprise, he answered, Fu, Du, Can, Scatiel, or God Almighty's blood. This is sacred ground, the same as Cajon de Lopez. The Great Spirit forbids our living in it. A low place on the top of a large range of mountains about 8 to 10 miles wide extended east and west as far as the eye could see. On the other side of this, old Escanalea told me we would find a mountain as large as we had climbed going into Montezuma. I judged from the distance we had traveled that it was between 300 and 400 miles northwest of what is now Teviston, and that it must lie east of the Colorado River. For old Escanalea told me that the waters running through Montezuma City entered the Tuinza, or large waters, meaning the Colorado River. At this time, he described the Grand Canyon of the Colorado, and he called it Terrace tu Chaudu, or Bad Mountains, and said that the mountains on either side of the river were perpendicular. The river had cut its way through the Bad Mountains, and frequently he had heard his people say that the invaders had an underground passage through the Grand Canyon. This, he said, I have never found. On our return home, we took the same trail, but did not turn off at the thicket of pines. On the east side, we could see old shafts made by the Jesuits, and a few miles farther from the point where we had entered the valley were the remains of an old reduction works. Each day, as we traveled, we continued to pass old abandoned shafts. The last ones were between the San Francisco and the Gila rivers, about 12 miles from the point where the San Francisco enters the Gila. This was taken from a website called Tuscoro.com, and the writer writes, Is this the undiscovered city of Abacus, Granada? I know that this counters my idea that Abacus was in Phoenix, Arizona, but it is good to explore other ideas as well. This story tells us a few interesting things that I would like to discuss further. The story gives us a detailed account from a different perspective than what our history books tell us. Escanalea tells us that the invading force, supported by religious figures, likely Jesuits or early Spanish, was responsible for building structures along rivers, the same type of structures the narrator later explores, acequias, ruins, churches, etc. He also suggests that they melted rocks into water. This clearly refers to metallurgy, mining and smelting operations, which is attributed to the invaders, not the Apache. The fact that the Apache did not reclaim the site and considered it sacred or forbidden after the fall of the invaders suggests they did not originally inhabit or construct it. It was theirs only by later conquest, not by origin. So did the Apache believe that Montezuma's castle was crafted by the Spanish. Was that the case, or was Montezuma's castle a much older structure that the Spanish occupied that the Apache did not know about or were unaware of? When we talk to our mainstream science sources, we find that Montezuma's castle was constructed by the Sinagua people, a prehistoric culture. Radiocarbon dating and dendrochronology places the construction around 1100 to 1350 AD. It was abandoned around 1400 AD, long before Coronado or any Spanish contact in Arizona. We also know that the Spanish do like to take structures for their own. So who is right? The Apache are not originally from Arizona. Most scholars agree that the Apache and Navajo, Diné peoples migrated south into the American Southwest from the northern plains or Canada, likely sometime between 1000–1500 AD. Or maybe Escanala's story is not about the Montezuma's castle. What other sites exist in this area? Clear Creek Ruins, or Saquavayu, is 3 miles east of Verde River and was once the largest habitation site in the Verde Valley. This settlement was strategically placed along a major trade route. It was occupied by the Sinagua people around 1000 AD and later the Yavapai. What is even more interesting is that it is said that Abacu or Abacus was named Granada for its similarities to Granada, Spain. This area would be closer in temperature and landscape, as Granada, Spain would be compared to Phoenix. Stay tuned, there is more to come.